So, wir fangen hier immer ziemlich pünktlich an, wie ihr schon gemerkt habt. Der nächste Talk ist auf Englisch, deshalb mache ich auch die Ankündigung Englisch. Ich hoffe, ich schaffe das. We heard a lot about open data so far, and now we come to a special field, open cultural data. The next two persons on stage will explain us what is open cultural data, why is it important, and what are its benefits for society, both and institutions, and how can cultural institutions open up in an effective way. And on stage, please give a warm welcome for Joris Pekel and both for Daniel Dietrich. Joris Pekel, he's from Amsterdam, he lives there and works for the Open Knowledge Foundation, and he's specialized in digital heritage. And next to him there's Daniel. And after him, or with him together, is Daniel Dietrich, and he declared himself as an open data evangelist working for the Open Data Foundation, Open Knowledge Foundation in Germany. Thank you.
Hi everybody. Yeah, I'm going to do this in English. I hope you don't mind, but my German is not good enough to talk to you today. I'm Joris. I live in Amsterdam. I work for the Open Knowledge Foundation for the Open GLAM initiative, and I'm about to tell you what that is. And next to me is Daniel, the chairperson of the Open Knowledge Foundation Germany, and I guess he does loads of other stuff.
I'm actually here today only to second you and stay by your side, smiling. Or let him talk.
Cool. Right, a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about. So first of all, I'm going to go into the notion of a cultural commons, and more specifically a digital cultural commons. I will talk a bit about why it's important that this is an open commons. I will go briefly into a few open projects, and then in the end go into curating this vast amount of data in the commons. So first of all, I work for the Open Knowledge Foundation. People who have been earlier in this room, I think, have seen a few other things that we do around transport data. Most people, I think, know us for our work within the open government data and the CCAN portal, which is being used by governments such as the UK one and the EU one to publish their data sets. Basically, we work to open up data and knowledge, make it freely available for everybody to reuse, and also make it used and useful. And I think those last two things are really important, because just opening up stuff is often not enough. So this is the Open GLAM initiative. We do what I just said, but then with cultural data. So we go to institutions, help them opening up their digitized content and metadata, and bring it to the people who can then make use of it. So it's a bit of a weird thing. So first of all, I'm going to explain what it actually is. Why GLAM? I think that's the biggest question mark. So open is digital content or data that is free to use, reuse, and redistribute without any technical or legal restrictions. And GLAM is an acronym for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, Museums. It's being coined by somebody from the Wikimedia movement a few years ago, I believe, because every time giving a presentation saying Galleries, Libraries, Archives, Museums takes a lot of time. If you want to know more about what open is, please refer to the open definition. There you get a really clear set of, clear description about what we mean with open, and particularly what open is not. So for example, using a non-commercial restriction, it does not count as open. Okay, so I will first talk a bit about the commons, and I will start with doing that by talking about the traditional commons as from economics. So from Wikipedia, resources accessible to all members of a society. So traditionally, you had environmental examples, forest, fish, air. This is all stuff where everybody can make use of, everybody can walk around the forest, everybody can chop a tree and bring it home, everybody can fish in the sea, we can all breathe the same air. So traditionally, people say this is non-excludable and also non-rivalrous. In 2013, this notion is a bit debated, because, I mean, people do own forest, fish, the seas are getting empty, and, well, I haven't seen people claiming air, but perhaps we can. So what is the digital commons? This is a more thorough description and information and knowledge resource that are collective created and owned or shared between or among a community, and that is freely available to third parties, and thus they are oriented to favor use and reuse rather than to exchange as a commodity. So the promise of a digital commons is, besides it being non-excludable, because everybody can access the same data set, non-rivalrous, you don't own your data, you share it with people, people can also reuse it indefinitely. I can take a certain data set, I can take a piece of content, I can reuse it in any way I want, and at the same time you can still also do that, and you can do it again and again, and your neighbor can do it, and so on. So digital artifacts can be curated, remixed, and annotated by anyone, anytime. And we can build upon each other's work. We can continue it, but we can also start with a new data set and do a whole different thing or replicate the thing. When I talk about cultural content, I think it's important that the difference, what we often talk about with cultural institutions, is made clear. So you have content and metadata. The content is quite easy. It's digitized material from institutions, which can be anything. It can be a video, a painting, a book, a 3D model. So here we have the 16th century medieval manuscript, 15th century, I believe, from the Ascension Day of Christ going to heaven. And here on the right, we have Egon Schiele from the early 20th century. It's one of his landscapes. So this is digitized content, but content also comes with metadata. And metadata, the pure basics of metadata is about finding the data. So you want to know who made it, you want to know what he named it, what's the title of the work, when did he create it, is also very useful. And also some more technical details, what's the size of the painting, what kind of paint did he use, and such. But you can go even further by, for example, adding a transcription. So people can actually, it becomes machine readable. People can work with it. You can translate the content. You can make even an analysis of it and link to further reading. And as you see, as this is often part of metadata, the borders, the line between metadata and content becomes a bit vague, because somebody who did a transcription can say, well, this is actually my original piece of work, this is content, so I will copyright this, and so on. So there are all kinds of difficult discussions around content versus metadata, which I unfortunately will not go into today because we can spend hours on that, I guess. So why should this data be open? And this is what I usually tell institutions. So first of all, I will go into each detail more in the next slides. So first of all, helping GLAMs fulfill their public mission. They will reach out to a larger audience, allow them to participate, connect and contextualize collections. I think that's very important. And finally, keep memory institutions relevant in the digital age. So first of all, the public mission. If you just look at mission statements and responsibilities and whatever they call it on their websites, they are public institutions. They are there, they are publicly funded, they serve the public, which means you, the taxpayer. And every single institution we come across, basically, maybe a few research institutions don't, but they all say enable access, accessibility, sustainability. Access, again, there's a little bit of education in there, make it available for use and such. It's all there, and these are not mission statements of the last few years, but these are mission statements which has been there forever, since they started. And they are still working on these missions. So by opening up your data, by giving it to the audience, to a much wider audience that you could ever imagine, you are simply serving your public mission. You can reach out to a global audience. This is a small case study from the Netherlands. We have the Institute of Sound and Vision, and they have the Open Images project. So what they did, they digitized some of their audiovisual collection. They uploaded it to Wikimedia Commons, so it could be used in Wikipedia. It resulted in 500 articles actually started embedding these different video clips. International, they also started using it, and they now get 2.5 million views a month just by putting it on Wikipedia. And the interesting thing is that, this is a video of a cow, but it's one example. It's a cow who wandered off, the mother wandered off in the woods, found a deer, and now you have some inbreed thing. Well, Netherlands, 50s. But the interesting thing is, it's 15% of their collection. So they have hardly digitized anything, and they could only, even less, they can make openly available. So 0.015% of their collection is available on Wikimedia Commons, and it results in 2.5 million views a month. Participation. You can invite your visitors and users to contribute to aspects of your collection. They can pick data from different collections, put it in and curate it, put it in a different context. They can enrich it. A lot of institutions that open data got response from users saying, well, actually, you say this is 1947, but this is not 1947 because I can see that because of the helmet he has during this battle and so on, this is 1945, and they change it afterwards. And so to some extent, users can also provide new content by adding information, but also by, there's been different roadshows, for example, where people bring their own collections from World War I, World War II, for example, to be digitized and added. Yeah, the connect and contextualize thing. So this is Van Gogh's work. His paintings are all over the world. We have the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, but they don't have everything at all. There's stuff in München, there's stuff in Berlin, there's stuff in the US. And I think particularly the internet can do really well is bring all these different collections together. And you, as a researcher, for example, you can, from your computer, you can get access to all these different things, bring them together and look at it, compare them, show it in a timeline, and also add secondary literature like diaries while he created this, and you can actually do a much more thorough research than you could when you would do it physically. Of course, there are issues, and I've decided to not go too much into the issues, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. So institutions are concerned about the loss of revenue streams. They say, well, if we open it all up, who is going to pay us for that? Attractions of private schemes that lock down heritage. It's opening up, and digitization is pretty expensive. So an institution cannot do it themselves. So often they go into some public-private partnership. I think the most famous one is the Google Art Project, where they digitize your stuff, but in return, you give them the exclusive rights for 15 years to work with it, which is often, and on the one hand, it's nice that it's there, but on the other hand, it's really weird when stuff that's so old that it's in the public domain, everybody should have access to it, all of a sudden is not accessible anymore except via Google service. Whereas about the misuse of data and content, I think what you very often hear is, well, what if Nazis use my stuff? It's a concern. I don't think it's a very legit one because people can do that anyway, and you often as an institution don't have the means to sue them. And I think this is by far the biggest one, legal uncertainties, licensing and orphan works. So you have a work, you don't know who made it, or how are you going to ask him or her or his inheritance what you can do with it? Can I make it accessible? No idea. So it just lays there untouched by anybody. And the technical challenges. So we should all use the same standards, and we should use tools to get access to data and reuse it. I will briefly talk about a few open projects to show what has been done over the last few years. So this is Europeana. This is a really big project funded and initiated by the European Union. It has been there since 2008. It originally started with the idea, a really political idea of the European Union that culture can bring us closer together. We can learn about each other's culture. We can show stories from different angles. I mean, if you just look at major events in history, there is always a different story from a different country and from a different village even. So that was the original idea. What they didn't say is that it was also a response to the Google Books project. They came along and they started digitizing European books, which all went well until they started touching the French books, and they got really upset with these Americans touching our French heritage, and we are going to do it ourselves. They now have 28 million records from 2,600 institutions in their database, but it's all metadata, so information about the work. It all links to an actual digitized object. but you can't access via Europeana all this stuff from one entry point, basically, which they hope to change, but they kind of realized that they made sure that metadata in Europeana is now all under a CC0 license, which means that it's as freely available as possible. Anybody can do anything with it. It's basically out of copyright. But to do that with content is much harder because people are still living. Yeah, it's hard. And metadata is something the institutions created themselves, basically. So they own the copyright, they own the rights, so they can open that up. And for content, it's a much more difficult story. And they link to institutions. Yeah, this is a visualization we made over the years how much Europeana has grown, but looking at the time, I can show you the link if you want at the end, because then you can just look it up. You can see over the years how much Europeana has grown. This is the DPLA, the Digital Public Library of America. It launched, I think, 3 weeks ago now. So basically what they're doing is a similar thing as Europeana, but then in the US. So they started off with 2.5 million records from 200 institutions, metadata again with a link. And luckily, the DPLA and Europeana very much work together. So they realized that in order to do this right, we need to align our efforts and to make one big database where everybody can get access to everything. This is Wikimedia Commons, so the media repository of the Wikimedia Foundation. So people can upload content to that. It's volunteer-driven, but they do have a lot of collaborations with cultural institutions. So they talk to institutions, they upload their material to the Commons, and Wikipedians can use it to enrich Wikipedia articles, for example, which leads to a major outreach for these institutions. And again, people come back to them saying, well, this metadata is wrong, and so on. They have 17 million media files. By far, not all of them are very interesting, but there's a lot of stuff there. I don't know how many institutions actually work together with Wikimedia Commons, because sometimes the volunteers themselves just took public domain material and uploaded it there. So I don't really know that. And it's content, so you can actually see something. And there's always a very clear licensing visible. So, and the volunteers are quite strict that if it's not 100% sure that this is, for example, in the public domain, they will remove it. Finally, the Internet Archive. I'll run through it a bit quicker. Volunteers, 9 million media files. Also, lots of different stuff. If you're a Grateful Dead fan, you're really good there. Content, various licenses. So, in summary, there are 30 million metadata records just within Europeana and the DPLA. There's more. There are 25 million open media files, and more is coming, because in Europe, which is doing pretty well when it comes to digitization, less than 10% is actually digitized at the moment. I think it's far less than 10% if you take the average over whole of Europe. And so more is coming, so here we go. How to make sense of that. That's what I want to go into now, because if you go to a Europeana portal right now and you type in Van Gogh, you get 25,000 hits. How useful is that? So we need a way to curate this commons. So recently, the co-founder of the Open Knowledge Foundation, Rufus Pollock, wrote a blog post about small data versus big data. I think this is, if you haven't read it, it's on the blog of the Open Knowledge Foundation, and I can recommend it. It's basically about, instead of creating these incredibly huge sets of data owned by a company all on one server, for example, we need different packages of data. So when again, the Van Gogh example, for me, it's very useful to get a torrent file with just all of his works. I download it and I have it all. Find relevant links. That's something which the web is getting better and better at. So you have an author you find interesting, who influenced him, where did he live, which other artists live there and such. So you can continue exploring and researching. And finally, we need tools to make sense of these vast amounts of data and to work with it. Because we should allow people to collect the data, so bring it together, visualize it, not only put it on maps, but also you can think of showing a timeline of an artist, which periods were where and why, and add extra information on top of that. Annotate. in research, that's something that they're really looking at, the idea of annotating academic texts and basically all kinds of text, doing it together in a collaborative way and being able to say, well, this paragraph was inspired by this author, this is a critique on this, he said this also in this book, and so on, create this whole link of annotations. Mash up, just do anything you want with it, and much more. And when we talk to cultural institutions about doing this, they often say, well, no, we are the experts. We are the curators. We've learned years and years for this. We know how to do this best. If the users start doing this, they will rip our collection apart. They will take all meaning out of it. And our work is basically all for nothing. So yeah, I was in a train yesterday from Amsterdam to Berlin, so I had a lot of free time and no internet. So I did this. So, and so basically what we're trying to do a lot with institutions is letting them work together with the users, because very often they also can't do everything themselves, and users are, the community is very strong and they really want to help people. And in some cases, they even are the experts. So you can make use of people, or make use sounds a bit harsh maybe, but people are willing to contribute their expertise to your collection to make it better and such. And a lot of institutions, I don't know how the exact situation in Germany is, but in the Netherlands, institutions are getting less and less funding every year. And they see great, as an outcome of that, they started working a lot together with cultural institutions, with the community. Within the Open Knowledge Foundation, we have been working on a couple of software tools to facilitate this. So first of all, we have Textus, which is a tool to collaborate around text. So it allows you to pull in texts from all kinds of different sources. Wikisource, another Wikimedia project, has a lot of different sources, a lot of different texts there from philosophers, all transcribed. You can pull it in and you can start annotating and linking and so on. We have the Timeliner, which I'm a big fan of. It's just a really simple application. It allows you to populate a Google spreadsheet and it shows you a timeline. So if you are a bit familiar with querying databases, you can do this in, I guess, 20 minutes, maybe clean up your data a bit, search for, what we did here, search for all medieval philosophers between 1000 and 1400, and pull in the fields of geolocation, the description, the dates, an image, and you can show it. Crowdsourcing, we have a tool called Crowdcrafting, which allows you to easily set up tools, applications for an institution to work together with the community. So here, this is a transcription application. And this is something that we are talking a lot about with different cultural institutions. It's really interesting to see how there's a certain need to get this implemented. And basically, the idea is that I, with my fairly limited programming skills, could go to an institution and say, well, we can set this up for you in half a day. We can get this going, and people, your volunteers, which institutions very often have a lot of, can help you improving your database very easy. And finally, curation. This is also one of our projects, the public domain review, picking the most beautiful stuff out of the public domain, highlighting it, showing it, and asking people to write an article about it. This is, when it comes to public outreach, it's by far our most popular project. It gets, I think, more than 100,000 hits a month. And it just shows what kind of value there is in public domain still, but you need to curate it to some extent. If you just go give people a huge database and they can't make sense of it, they often lose their interest. So, to conclude, the 21st century GLAM, it remains, and it has always been, the key preserver of our shared cultural heritage. An authoritative source of information, expertise about your collection, and they curate, contextualize, and tell stories about the collection. That was there, it will be there, and institutions are still very relevant, also in the 21st century, and also when all their stuff can be found online. But at the same time, they can make use of an audience, they can reach out to an audience far beyond the wildest dream of its first founders. They can connect to other collections that contextualize stories about its objects, and a closer connection to its audience and the improvements to its digital collections that comes with that. At the Open Glam initiative, we try to help institutions to reach these kind of goals. We are relatively small, so what we do is we work a lot with different networks in other countries. So I'm doing this in the Netherlands together with a colleague in the UK. Daniel here is our man here in Germany, but that's all OKF. But in other countries there are, for example, similar initiatives, like in Finland and in France and in Spain and in the US, quite a big network. So what we try to do is connect with different people who work on the similar thing, basically, get this material accessible, and we work together, we share experiences, we help each other out, and such, share documentation. Because in the end, it's far more useful when somebody in Italy goes actually to an Italian institution, talking with them, well, what are your actual issues? How can we overcome them? Then it's just me sending an email saying, well, hey, I noticed that your data is not open. Can you do something about it? Yeah, so thanks. One thing, if you're interested in the topic around open data and culture, at the end of the year, I think it's in end of November, we are organizing with a couple of partners and Wikimedia and the Jewish Museum and iRights. We organize a conference which is 2 days with talks about open data and culture. Well, not only open data, but meer verantwoording voor das culturele Erbe. Thank you. That was it. Thanks.